Welcome to Perspectives in Peds, or PIP for short, your go-to podcast for insights into paediatric practice. From clinical approaches and emerging research to the everyday wins and challenges, we bring you OT perspectives that inform, inspire, and spark conversation.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Perspectives in Peds. Today I'm joined by Georgia and first time on the couch, Jessie.
Yes, thank you for having me.
PIP debut! Yeah, woohoo! I don't know why did you choose to have your first episode as chatting about burnout? Because that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Not workplace burnout, although I'm sure people will get some tips, but burnout in neurodivergent kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when I was looking at sort of the topics that were being covered, I was very much drawn to burnout. I have experience personally with burnout before I was diagnosed with ADHD and medication. So I think I'm just very passionate in giving a voice to those who may not know they have burnout or know that they're experiencing it. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Woohoo. What about you, George?
I just think it's a really interesting topic also. And I think it's one of those ones that we can miss quite easily. So I'm really similar to Jessie. I think this is a cool one in the advocacy space that a lot of us clinicians can play a really big role in advocating for these kids who are experiencing burnout.
Love that. So I guess any other reasons why we think this is an important topic to cover, apart from bringing exposure to it, why should we chat about it and educate on what burnout looks like?
I actually feel like the more we understand and recognise burnout in, neurodivergent, autistic ADHDers and everyone else who comes under the neurodivergent umbrella, the more we recognise what is contributing to their burnout, the more we can start to affect some more like big picture changes to reduce the occurrence of this happening. So I think, it's recognition that hopefully if we start noticing trends and patterns and giving things a name a little bit more, hopefully we can make a bit more of a big picture systemic change that will reduce the occurrence of neurodivergent burnout.
And I suppose often it's mislabeled as occasionally being like a behavioural concern or a mental health concern. So it's important to recognise it for what it is as well so that we can support the individual in the best way possible.
I love that. I think we have a huge role to play in both prevention and then supporting kids who are experiencing it. So I'm excited to chat about this topic too. I guess who notices when a child is potentially depleted or seeing those early signs of burnout before it tips into real crisis point? Who are the people that often notice it first from your perspective?
I suppose potentially teachers. They may not recognise it as burnout, but they may notice there's, I guess, like a regression of skills or the child is sort of removing themselves from the class or they're learning. They're just not themselves potentially.
Yeah, definitely parents and caregivers and those people who know the child really intimately will recognise probably a big change potentially in the home environment after the school day as well.
Yeah.
I think Jessie and I were chatting before this episode and masking was a topic that we said was like a really important point to kind of discuss today as well. Parents and caregivers to answer your question.
I think sometimes people understand burnout as looking a certain way, like potentially withdrawing or shutting down, but actually I think we can talk about all the different ways that burnout can present as well. So I like that you brought up teachers because often they do notice changes and like you said, it might not always be burnout. It might not look, but it might look like changes in behaviour or just changes to participation or changes to how they're presenting or even within relationships with the teachers. So I really like that point. I guess before we get too far down the rabbit hole, should we sort of look at some definitions when we're talking about potentially fatigue and burnout and where there might be some crossover and where there might be where they're quite different. So I guess if we're talking about fatigue, what are we talking about when we're talking about fatigue?
Fatigue is, I guess, like a state of being worn out, tired, not having enough energy to do something. But when it's in contrast with burnout, the The difference is like it's experiencing fatigue on a persistent, recurrent level. It kind of has a deeper impact on a more broad kind of set of daily activities or functional activities. But fatigue can be kind of isolated to one domain sometimes as well, not always. So I guess the contrast is fatigue can be a little bit more acute in comparison to burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. And burnout can last for a very long extended period of time. It can be months, years. It's not just a bad night's sleep or a bad day, essentially. It's a long period of time, which is important to know. It's very different from just being tired.
And it's also not fatigue can be put down sometimes to I've done more than I had capacity for and I'm recovering from that. But burnout is, again, like a chronic state of that. We have repeatedly and perpetually spent more tokens than we had, or spent more spoons if we like the spoon theory, and we have not got the ability to replenish our spoons every day with a night's sleep and a good dinner and a hug from mum or whatever it is.
I think it's also important to note that it's not just ongoing fatigue that can lead to burnout. I mean, there's elements of ongoing, it's similar to stress, I suppose, that can be quite acute versus, a lot of excessive anxiety or even sensory overload for repeated periods of time. And there's so many contributing factors that can cause a student or a child to experience burnout. Is there anything else that that can contribute in the short term to burnout over time?
I suppose it can just be like almost a stacking of demands or an increase of demands. And when I say demands, that could just be school. It could be after school activities. It can be coming to therapy. So just like an increase in demands essentially over time.
Yeah. And then feeling like you're never going to kind of get out of that state. It can sometimes feel quite helpless, I suppose, is that idea of I can see all these demands and there's no hope that these demands are going to be alleviated at any point in the short term, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think I like how you brought up the spoons theory or energy accounting type thing, where I guess in that lens of fatigue versus burnout versus potentially just overload, where can sometimes the spoon theory oversimplify things when we're talking about burnout?
I think it's the inference that we have as much control over our spoons as the spoon theory allows us to think we do. I think sometimes it oversimplifies because it implies that we can just choose to omit certain activities or we can choose to modify an activity to make it cost less from our energy bank or from our battery or from our spoon tank or whatever we call it. But I think particularly in the case of neurodivergent burnout, we are looking at people who are losing energy and not replenishing it through their environment, through their activities, but through things that are literally just their like day-to-day experience as well. Their cognition, their brain power, their environments, their social participation, kind of everything.
Yeah, it can really encompass, it's that idea of the body keeps score, isn't it?
Completely.
It's really like a nervous system response as well. It's not just
Totally.
cognitive.
It's
So
innate.
I like that you brought that up because there is, even if kids can't sort of replenish their own spoons or fill their own batteries or buckets, it's like sometimes there is an element of parents or the environment being able to reduce demands or fill that bucket. But I think in like true burnout, sometimes there's not even things like that that can kind of assist because the body is almost just in that state of complete kind of shutdown
Yeah,
in a lot
absolutely.
of ways. So sometimes it's not as simple as like, oh, let's just find some occupational satisfaction or let's just have a day off school and see if that helps. I think that it requires more thought than that. So why is this so prevalent in neurodivergent kids?
I guess, one of the things that makes burnout really prevalent in neurodivergent kids is I guess, I'm trying to put this tactfully, but, the world is not designed to suit a lot of neurodivergent brains. That's why we unfortunately kind of use the word neurodivergent and neurotypical. Neurodivergent people experience a lot of challenges in addition to the things that we are imposing on kids to be challenging on purpose so that they can learn and grow. Their social environment, their physical environment, their sensory environment. And so there are a lot of complicating factors that can make things that may seem common or everyday be challenging because of their neurodivergence. Yeah.
And I also think from like a family perspective and the individual's perspective, just essentially like a lack of knowledge of what burnout is and what it looks like. Like I was telling Georgia a bit earlier when I was looking into burnout and doing my research, it was only then that I sort of reflected back on my own experience and I was like, oh, I was in burnout. That's what I was experiencing. So in the moment, I had no idea and my family obviously didn't know. So yeah, I think just not having sort of the knowledge of what it is can make it really difficult to obviously understand and then detect in someone.
Absolutely. I think like we were raising earlier, masking is a massive one. And I think I think of a client who I have who is still by criteria kind of meeting the expectations on school grounds. But it is coming at a complete cost of every minute of the day that they are not in the classroom. All of their home life, their emotional coping, their mental health and well-being is being substantially impacted because they are working so hard to mask and they are unfortunately going down a really slippery slope to burnout. And fortunately for this family, because they are recognising now what is happening, we are trying to put in a couple of stop catches here and there. But yeah, definitely that the act of masking is something that requires a lot of mental demand from a child or a neurodivergent person that can play a really big tax. Yeah.
In some ways, I think it's also not something that can just be, supported through things like medication and that kind of thing as well. It's not like, anxiety where it is like a neurobiological thing and medication can support that alongside therapy. It's kind of, it's a little bit more all-encompassing, I think, than that. And it's tricky sometimes where a child has often potentially experienced anxiety for a long time as well or depression, and this is different. And sometimes we obviously don't want it to ever end up where it's in crisis, where we're truly in crisis and, they're not just missing school, but we're potentially looking at hospitalisation or complete withdrawal from daily life and those kinds of things. But I guess those early signs, because of the masking and because of sometimes, I guess, self-awareness and our interoception as well, we miss those early signs or they don't know what that looks like or feels like. So alongside that, I think we can miss cues with kids and we're not. So I think early on in a preventative way, I think it's really important that we look at giving ways for kids to experience what they're feeling internally, emotionally, like to tap into their body clues and be able to actually advocate for themselves. I think
absolutely.
that is really important in the prevention piece, but I suppose also when we're actually supporting kids in burnout as well.
And convincing teachers that they do need support even though they technically look fine as well. Convincing, other caregivers and, broader people who support that child. Just because they look fine in your environment doesn't necessarily mean that they are. So supporting the child to be an advocate is a big one, and parents to be an advocate and clinicians to be advocates too.
Bit of an interesting one. Do you think as clinicians, sometimes we, I guess, at worst case cause burnout, but also contribute to it?
I suppose every individual is going to be a little bit different, but essentially not always, the answer is not always more therapy or more support. Like that can actually increase the demands like we were talking about, and it can actually cause more distress for the individual. So I suppose it could potentially sometimes, contribute to the burnout if we're prescribing homework, prescribing suggestions, strategies. We're just actually increasing their demands, which might not be the appropriate thing at that time.
Yeah, it's hard to admit, but it's true. I mean, coming to therapy is hard work, and I think, I often find myself in completely different conversations reminding families that, OT is homework and hard work, and it's like extra school and that all those sorts of things that I find myself telling families, but using it in the context of burnout is probably really an important thing to keep in mind, because a child in burnout knows that they feel rubbish and they know that they don't have much within them to be able to do something about it at this stage. So sometimes just coming in and being like, have you tried this? What about this? Can just be like quite disheartening. And, long term that could rupture their relationship with engaging in therapy. So unfortunately, yes, even though I'd love to just always be able to fix things and help, because we're clinicians, that's what we want to do.
I think also the nature of goals means future. It means change in some capacity. So I think our responsibility to work with families and, really think about true family-centered practice and child-centered practice is understanding that whilst goals mean future, sometimes that means you need to meet the child where they're at. And there's this question of like capacity building versus maintenance. And I think maintenance kind of gets used in a weird way, but sometimes maintenance is maintaining your wins or protecting the current capacity of the
completely
of that client, and that in itself is a win. So knowing when you need to step back, and that doesn't always need to mean less therapy, but it can mean different delivery of therapy. And sometimes that means more education of the caregivers around them, and that we do need to sharpen the axe to chop down the tree. Like we need to be able to work with those around so that the environment is conducive to that child surviving sometimes for now, and then slowly building capacity and putting supports in place so that they eventually can thrive and work towards goals. But I guess our role should be always still for those goals to be meaningfully and, meaningfully considered and child-centered, because I think we have a habit of moving the goalpost consistently. Like a child meets a goal, and rather than sort of being like, oh, let's have a bit of a break and just celebrate that win and let's maintain this win and consolidate it, it's kind of like, what next?
It requires a lot more of a flexible perspective on what counts as functional and what counts as a goal, because I think we always want to see our kids achieving more or achieving the next level or continuing to grow. And I think where Jessie and I were speaking about the use of the word regression in burnout, media and burnout papers is like scattered everywhere. There's so much talk of regression where actually maintaining exactly where you are is sometimes massive progress in the absence of actually continuing to, for lack of a better phrase, regress or not be able to show the skills that you otherwise would have been able to show if you were not burnt out.
So do we think that sometimes doing less could be the best recommendation that we could make?
I think definitely could have its place in some situations. I think if we're talking, about burnout in neurodivergent children, they don't have that cognitive capacity to take on anymore. So maybe a break could be beneficial in allowing them to reset their nervous system and stabilize it so that when they come back, they have something more to give, giving them a break to rest and restart.
And sometimes it goes the other way. Like we're talking from an OT perspective. Sometimes there's just too many people involved and we're like, you know what, this kid just needs to rest and recover, and that means like a reduction in school and maybe maintaining psych support, for example, and we're just going to bow out for a little bit. And sometimes it's the opposite, that the kid benefits more from maybe a more functional approach, and we can kind of come into school and look at some different supports or provide a different kind of approach, and that we bow out in other things. And I think that's why when kids are complex and experiencing something as significant as burnout, really a care team approach is really important. Like we need to make sure that we're not bowing out so much and that everyone's like, oh, well, like maybe I'm overloading, let's all just tap out, and then this child's kind of left.
Help me.
Yeah. So I think this highlights why we wanted to talk about this, because on a practical level, it can be really hard to be like, am I the best person to be involved with this child? What can I bring? And where's that balance with what this child needs and what could potentially be overloading versus what they're getting elsewhere? And sometimes those conversations actually need to be had, and they need to be spoken about as a care team with the family and in collaboration with the child. What is overloading you, and starting to explore some of those things. Maybe they love, coming to OT and exploring something like classroom strategies, and that's actually what they feel would be useful at this point in time. So we need to give kids a voice
Absolutely
in this as well.
And I liked how you said before, Jack, you just mentioned how taking a break could be for the child, but we could really amp up our education with the families and parent-only sessions and still having that support for them, but it might just look different to how we're used to with just child sessions or however it may look.
So what else can we actually do as clinicians to support kids and their families, I guess first ahead of burnout before it really hits?
I think there's a lot of education we can do about like energy accounting principles and like you were saying earlier, giving kids a bit of vocab about their emotional state, their energy state, their sensory preferences, all of those things. I think all of that skill building in terms of giving the child more access to communicate to us in whatever way suits them, how they are going, so that when there are shifts in how they are going, they have a really clear way to really clear outlet to express that to us. It's probably like a massive one I spend some energy on.
I think also just collaborating with the family in terms of what are the demands in your week at the moment? How does your week look, and how can we either reduce or make more structure just to help in that sort of sense? Like how many demands are there at the moment, and how can we look at saving our energy in certain areas or reducing the demands in certain areas?
I think avoiding assumptions too. I've had a student that was, in school and really quite burnt out, and the answer, they were in high school, and the answer was to kind of cut languages and cut some of those things and keep the core subjects. And when we actually spoke to this student, he was very clear that actually languages was the one thing that he really loved. That was his reprieve in his day.
Subject, yeah.
So it was his fun subject. So, and it's the same with extracurriculars. We think we're overscheduling kids, and so we strip out their drama class after school, and it's actually that's the last thing that they need dropped. And we just need to be really open-minded, not put our own biases in terms of what is burnout. There's some kids that love school.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really energy bringing for them.
Yeah.
So actually it's the overscheduling or the homework or the executive load of, meal times, or it could be anything else. So really keeping an open mind across the week and being quite strategic in where we can provide opportunities for recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also remembering that adding strategies is adding work, even if they're helpful strategies. And if we are giving from, I was going to say giving from one hand, we're taking from the other, but that's the wrong saying. If we are, let's flip the meaning of the saying and use it for here. We want to give, we want to give them some tools. We need to take away something else that we are expecting them to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so that we can actually use them.
Yeah, being aware that the learning of strategies is first like a cognitive, like it's knowledge consumption, and then it's practice, and then yes, it can be useful once it's generalized.
Yeah.
But that process from skill acquisition to generalization is a huge load. So it can be useful at some point. And I think that's where clinicians can get stuck. Like you said, we want to help. And if you had this skill and it was generalized to everyday life, things would be better. But now's not the time to learn that skill. And sometimes, we have to recognize that as clinicians and not load more on. So I guess when we're talking about ND affirming practice, it's something that we're constantly learning and talking about a lot, and we've done episodes on that. Where can that get hard, I guess, when we're talking about burnout?
I think going off everything we've already spoken about, how as OTs we are inclined to want to help and want to give more strategies and everything, I think it's important to actually, in those moments, reframe what success looks like for that individual so that we are being neuroaffirming. We're acknowledging the burnout is happening, it's real, it's affecting them. So we need to change the goalpost, like we were saying, but we might need to bring them a bit closer. Just reframing what success looks like in that moment, which can obviously be hard if we're wanting to help, wanting to give more, wanting to give strategies.
Or using needing to be outcome driven.
Yeah.
When we're, trying to report on, and we want our therapy to be beneficial. So I like what you said, what is actually useful and beneficial can be different and it can still be a goal. We've just got to think a little bit more flexibly and creatively and really stretch our skills as good clinicians to be what does success for this child look like? And that it doesn't necessarily only mean skill development or more independence, or sometimes it is that the world around the child has learnt to accommodate them a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a huge risk of us supporting a neurodivergent client in a neurotypical environment to conform to their environment to be successful. There is a real risk of us setting a goal that is actually just not affirming for them. And so we want to be really mindful that we are not trying to change who they are in order to make them recover from burnout, for lack of a better phrase. We want to support them to succeed in a way that's actually fair for them and not making them change who they are. And sometimes the environment has to change for them.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that it's really hard. I guess the next question I had was around how do we support the adults around the child when a child is experiencing burnout. And I think sometimes there's a lot of grief for families because there is that process where potentially a mainstream classroom is never going to be right for that student, and that actually burnout is inevitable based on that child and their needs and what they can actually cope with. So sometimes it's really listening and hearing and understanding that, yes, the child is our client, but also the family is as well. And we need to walk alongside them on that journey and help them to understand that. What else do we want the adults around a student or a child to understand when we're supporting them with burnout?
I think it's important to provide the child with a safe environment. And when I say environment, that can be physical, the people around them. So if that means not going to school, allowing them to stay in their safe environment at home, or just providing them with people around them that that they feel safe with, not introducing new therapists, not bringing them to a new speech therapist in that case or whatever. Just keeping it as safe as possible for them.
Yeah, well said.
Also acknowledging that families are trying to do the best. So sometimes they're panicking.
Yeah.
So it's how do I just fix this? How do I support my child if they're experiencing burnout? There's all that blame of, have I pushed them too hard? What's going on? So I think I really liked that point you made. It's really about how do we create a psychologically safe and physically safe environment for that child to start to recover and then potentially at a speed that's appropriate to them start to learn some skills to obviously prevent this in future and recognize the signs for that child as well.
Yeah, I think connecting them to some lived experience resources as well. Who was the podcast?
Yeah.
Who was on the podcast that you listened to, Jessie?
Yeah,
the name escapes me.
I recently listened to a podcast and there was a guest on there, Christy Forbes, who is an autistic woman, autistic mum, and she has created essentially a community supporting families who have children experiencing burnout. And listening to her podcast was just so much more insightful for me listening to someone with lived experience herself and going through it with her children, I just found it so valuable hearing her side of things.
Yeah, when we talk about trying to be ND affirming and supporting adults around a child to be ND affirming, I think platforming lived experience voices is always going to be a massive way to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you for saving me because I forgot the name. I blanked.
We'll put the link to
yes, we
that
will.
in the show notes.
Absolutely. And link her Instagram page as well. It's got some great resources on it, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think neuro inclusion does a lot of work on that space too, particularly in advocating within the school environment. And both of those people being neurodivergent themselves also have neurodivergent children. So they have both angles to really understand and they're navigating how to support their kids. And that is often the case with the families we're supporting. So the more we can absorb lived experience whilst understanding it's an individual experience, the more our eyes can be open to the potential challenges and the blind spots that we might have as therapists. So,
and something Christy also mentioned that I think is really important was she does a lot of work in reassuring the families that this isn't the forever. This is the challenge at the moment, but your kid won't always have these really big challenges, that they will be okay. You just have to sort of ride the wave at the moment and support them however that may look.
It's pretty hard to live in the moment, isn't it? I think as humans, like, we're so programmed to be like, let's get out of this. Like, alarm bells are going off. Like, I need to get out of this state. This feels like shit and I need it to stop. But like sometimes it is tolerance of discomfort as well from a parent and a child perspective. Some quick fires.
Perfect.
Are you excited, Jessie?
I'm nervous.
All right. What's a sign of burnout that you wish every teacher knew about or would recognise?
What comes to mind straight away is withdrawal. I think of like the mental side of things in withdrawal. That's my answer.
About you, G?
I think a significant change in the way that they respond to challenge. I think the tolerance of, or the distress tolerance or tolerance window seeming like it's really narrow is a really big sign as well. You know, even anything that flips them into dysregulation because they're overexcited, overstressed, over sad, overtired, whatever it is that is dysregulating to that child occurring really quickly and rapidly can be a big one as well.
Most underrated form of doing less?
I think just letting the kid be, whatever that is. If the demand of getting up, getting dressed is too much, just letting them stay in their pajamas for the day. Or if they want to stay on their game for a bit longer but they've gone over their screen time boundaries that you've set, just allowing it, just letting them be in those moments.
I think remembering that for a lot of neurodivergent people, communication is a demand as well. And so letting them communicate to you less or differently is a big one as well.
I think also building in some self-compassion. I think that a lot of these kids, like, it's all well and good to miss a day of school, but then the mental load of the stress of missing that day of school almost exacerbates what they're trying to rest from.
Yeah.
So I think learning those skills to actually just be okay with taking what you need. Yes. I think sometimes that's something that parents can really help with, that it's okay that we need this. It's not forever, like you said. Yeah. We're not never going back. If that's something you want to work towards, we can. But for now, we're actually just resting and we're going to enjoy the rest and we're going to actually find the rest restful.
Yeah.
Because we can spend so much time stressing about the rest.
Done, hey? Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
No, it's so hard. Finish the sentence. A child who stopped trying is usually actually
burnt
out.
Yeah, burnt out.
Yeah. It's kind of potentially.
They're finding it really difficult to like navigate the cognitive demands that they're being faced with, essentially, which is burnout.
Yeah, well, they usually haven't stopped trying.
I
mean, I'd just say children don't stop trying.
No.
I don't think that's
it
a thing.
It appears like they've stopped trying, but actually the effort has just kind of stopped being fruitful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You put that really well.
Yeah, and reframing that perspective of that they won't to they can't at the moment.
Yeah.
It's not that they won't, it's that they actually can't.
Yeah.
Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, great
Thank
chat.
you.
Yeah, big one.
We'd love to hear from anyone who has any cool resources that we could share, or I guess different things that we can share in the community. So when the episode goes up on Instagram, please drop us a comment if you've got any cool resources. Otherwise, we hope you enjoyed the ep, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Before we go, if you are a clinician looking for more support between episodes, KidLink has a range of services designed to build your clinical knowledge and confidence. KidLink Education is home to our on-demand, high-quality professional learning you can apply straight away into your practice. If you want access to monthly PD, group supervision, and our community of like-minded OTs to learn from and connect with, check out OT-Link. We also offer clinical supervision, which is designed to support your growth across professional, clinical, organisational, and personal goals, wherever you are in your career. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit like, subscribe, and follow. It genuinely helps more clinicians find the show, which means a bigger community and more of us doing what we love. Thanks for listening.